Hello, buddy. Welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be going over the 10.10 support tier list. So, as always, if you enjoyed the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It helps out a ton. Come by, check out the stream as well. We've been starting around 11 p.m. or midnight Eastern Standard Time most nights. We usually go till about 4 or 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time most nights. It's a very chill, friendly community. I try to explain as much as I can about the game while I'm playing, and I also try to hold a conversation with the chat while I'm playing as much as possible, too. So, come on by, unwind. Enjoy your morning if it's Europe. Unwind for the evening if it's nighttime if you're US. We'd love to have you. And then we have lots of content like this on the channel as well if you enjoy it. I'm going to do a jungle tier list as well. I do patch notes and tier lists for every patch. We have topical guides like how to macro better, how to micro better, one tricks, dodging, just any topic you can think of. We probably have a guide about it. I'm willing to do a guide. I'm happy to do a guide on any content that you want as well. Just email me. Let me know what you have in mind. We can set that up. It's just $30, well researched, about an hour-long guide. If you're a channel member, then it's only $25. To become a member, just click that join button on YouTube or the PayPal link in the description. It's just $5 a month, and I give you $5 off any coaching or guiding that you want. If you want to watch more coaching sessions, I have a playlist of that as well. Over 200 coaching sessions for free that you can always access. And if you want a personalized coaching session for your gameplay, just email me. We can set that up. Let's go ahead and get going. Okay. So as always, I'll have a link to this Google Doc in the description. And in this Google Doc, you will find other little mini Google Docs, and this will tell you recommended runes, recommended items. Then it'll also give you a rating system for the champion, 1 to 5. 1 meaning the champion is one of the worst at that task for a support. 5 being the champion is one of the best for a support. And I think I need to update this a little bit. And I guess the scaling's not... That's probably pretty accurate. We'll bump it up to 4 on safety because you get so much vision. And I think the kill threat's probably also 4. But, yeah, 1 to 5 system there, and then recommended runes and recommended items. Okay, so let's go ahead and kick it off with Maokai. I think Maokai is still the best secret out there in support. You wouldn't think he'd be that much of a secret because he's got the second highest win rate right now, and he's been top 5 win rate for months and months and months. But just a lot of the mainstream media, the mainstream League of Legends content that does tier lists just doesn't talk about him. He just doesn't show up ever. He showed up occasionally. I think he's maybe like 1 or 2 times in pro as a support, but it's still very rare. So get him while he's hot. Get him before people figure it out. He did get nerfed a little bit on this patch. He was his mana cost went up by 10. Go ahead and get out of a couple of those tabs there. His mana cost went up by 10, but that doesn't matter as support because you're not really spamming your Q that much. Like that'll affect his top lane, maybe. I'm not really sure about the top lane, but for support, it doesn't matter. Like you're gonna get some mana regen anyways. Typically, you'll get a fairy charm or 2 kind of early on, so it's not that big of a deal, and it's still only 60 mana. So it's like if you're spamming Q on cooldown, level it's like 1 through 5, then maybe you can run out of mana, but otherwise it's not really going to be that big of a deal. So what does make him stronger? There's a couple of things. Number 1 is the Twisted Advance. This is the main reason why I started playing him in Diamond, and I switched off of Rakan. I do still play Rakan. I think that he's good in some matchups, but a lot of kind of the popular picks right now are very evasive, particularly Vayne and Lucian. And if you're against a Vayne or a Lucian or an Ezreal, then it's almost impossible to hit a W on them with Rakan, especially without your ult. It's just not happening. And it's really hard to hit things like hooks, just any skill shot. It's going to be hard to hit those champs. And so that's where Twisted Advance comes in. It's one of the only things that's like undodgeable. That's a basic ability for an engage. And so that's why I really like it. It's if you just like flash W on somebody, you're getting on them. They can't flash it. They can't get away from it. The only thing is if they have like an hourglass or something, they can delay, like they can get around it. You're still going to be on top of them, ready to hit them with your ult if they do that. But it just adds a layer of stickiness that just a lot of other support champions just don't have. There are some cute tricks with this too. You can reset tower aggro if you grab the aggro early. Maybe with your ult plus a Q, but you hold on to your W, then you can W and drop tower aggro because you do go untargetable for a little bit, like the little fizz icon there. So that's nice. Or if you time it, you time certain things perfectly, then you can avoid it. So you can avoid enemy hooks if you like twisted advance onto the enemy themselves, or if you twisted advance onto like a minion or something, you can avoid like Karthus ult, Jinx rockets, Ezreal ults. I mean, it's anything that could fly by you. You know, it functions just like a Vlad pool or a Fizz trickster, right? And that's another thing is you can get through a lot of their CC. You can get through their back line. So even if you know, Veigar throws up his cage or Braum throws up his shield or whatever's going on, you can get on that back line, right? You can just flash W onto their AD carry. You're gonna get it if you want to get it. So I just like the guarantee there. I think it's extremely powerful and very underrated. And the other big thing that I really like about him is the sapling toss. It has a really high amount of base damage. If you put it in a bush, it's 15 or 14% of their maximum health. So it's a great 1-point wonder. It only costs 60 mana. And it serves as a ward too for 30 seconds. And Riot has nerfed a lot of vision in the game, right? You know, the early game wards are not as strong as they used to be. You've got stupid crap like the Umbral Glaive running around on some popular junglers, some supports like Pyke and Senna, and things like that, and that just shuts out vision a lot. So there's been a lot of threat to vision lately, and so those Maokai saplings are great. It's like, yes, they can go over there and trigger them, but they have to go out of their way to do that, and they're going to be taking damage if they want to do that as well. So that's just really, really good. And the slow that it applies, I think it's like a 2-second slow. Yeah, for 35 seconds, non-decaying. So even just throwing up like a trail of these things in bushes when you're trying to do a dragon or whatever, and they have to walk through like 2 or 3 of these to get over to the dragon, you know, they're so slowed. They're taking so much damage. You have full vision of them while that's happening. It's just extremely powerful tool, and the range on it is massive. It's like 1100 range where you can throw this. So it's total safety. You know, no one's ever going to be able to sneak up in a bush on you. It's just phenomenal. I think it's the best vision control skill possibly in the game. It's pretty close. Now, it doesn't give you like full ward vision, but if you put it at like key choke points in bushes and things like that, you're going to get pretty good vision out of it. But anyways, so very strong ability. I think that's one of the marquee things about Maokai that I really like. And then Bramble Splash is nice too. You can just spam it. It's on a 5-second cooldown, 60 mana, so very cheap. Ends up being 250 damage. And it's a knockback, which is very nice. So you can do things like knock Zac out of the sky. Cat's like fumbled around this box. My daughter started sitting on this box and kind of crushed it, and the cat used to sit on it. But anyways, so I think that's really good. Rory, I'm gonna pop this window. It's kind of hot in here. Hopefully it doesn't attract too many bugs. He likes the window open anyway. So yeah, pretty good spammable damage, good knockback displacement, knocks things like Zac out of the sky or Leona trying to engage, just anything that's trying to jump, Jarvan flag and drag, Lee Sin trying to reconnect with his Q, just all kinds of stuff. So it's almost like a little Janna tornado that knocks people back. So really handy, and the fact that you can knock enemies if you engage with your W, you can knock them back into your team with your Q. So it's even better. In some cases than a stun is, because if they don't have a flash or a dash, because it's going to displace them. And then he also heals in the landing phase, so it's not like a massive heal, but it's something. It's better than Nautilus, it's better than Leona. You do get some sustain. If you take Second Wind, a couple of magic resist runes, and you just auto attack the wave every now and then, you can get through heavy harass lanes like Xerath, Vel'Koz, things like that. It's still not it still doesn't feel great laning against those champs, but it's going to feel a little bit better than it does against Leona or Nautilus. And then Nature's Grasp, low cooldown, clocking in at just 120. So not as low as Leona, but lower than Nautilus, and just has a huge hitbox. It's a very high probability you're going to hit multiple targets with this thing. It's just almost impossible to dodge if you get close to him. The only drawbacks of Maokai are that his engage range is much shorter. It's only 525, so you really need to flank, or you need a flash, or you need Shirelias. All of those are possibilities. So that's really the only drawback is his engage range is a lot shorter than a Nautilus or a Leona, but I think he just brings a ton of utility. You can also do stuff like, even aside from just his Twisted Advance and his ult, you can throw these saplings ahead so that when people are trying to run away, even if it's not in a bush and you're trying to chase them down, it'll still wake up and slow them for 2 seconds, right? And then your Bramble Smash can slow them. So he's just very, very sticky in a lot of situations. So I think Maokai's great. So I recommend Aftershock, Font of Life, Conditioning, and Revitalize. And then I've switched this over. And lately I've been doing Zombie Ward and Ingenious Hunter. And I like Ingenious because there are just a lot of active items that you can get. I was doing Shirelias for a while there. I think Shirelias is good if you have a bunch of champs that want to run them down. So getting the CDR on that's pretty good. Getting the CDR on your sweeper is really nice, particularly with Zombie Ward. You get to clear out vision really well late game. And then even stuff like if you get Gargoyle Stoneplate, which is very common as well, that also has an activatable. You can lower the cooldown on that, so it's going to be up more often. You can get Redemption sometimes on him. Get Knight's Vow, which you don't always switch with Knight's Vow, but if you're ganking sometimes, you might want to switch, right? Like if you're roaming middle or you're invading with the jungler, you might want to put the Knight's Vow on your jungler for that fight, and then after the fight, you want to put it back on your AD carry. So, having the active on Knight's Vow, being able to switch it around more often is useful. It's not as good as it is on some of the other ones, but it's still okay. And you just want to go for a defensive boot, Mercury Treader, Ninja Tabby. I mean, I guess you can go mobility boots, but if you go for a defensive boot, that's going to open you up to get more utility items. So if you have defensive stats on your boots, you might be able to get away with like a Redemption or a Shirelias, versus if you go Ninja Tabby, you can't, or mobility, you can't. You're going to be too squishy. And then just either Gargoyle or Knight's Vow is usually a good place to start. Gargoyle if they have really strong mixed damage, so if they have like a Zyra, Brand, Vel'Koz, something like that, and then a bunch of AD on their team, that might be useful. Or if they're just almost all AD, then Knight's Vow is a really good pickup. Then either Shirelias or Righteous Glory. Righteous is obviously going to be better for Maokai, but it's also like 600 more gold, so you kind of have to make the call there. Shirelias is still going to be very strong at a much cheaper price if that's what you need. And then late game, something like Locket can be pretty good too. But usually I find myself getting, and Redemption can be good too if you're doing a lot of team fighting. Because he does have a heal in his kit with his passive. I mean, it's not amazing scaling with plus healing and shielding, but just having that ultimate, or just having that Redemption drop down can still do a lot for team fights. I mean, you see that on champions like Thresh too. Sometimes they'll just take a Redemption just because it's a really good item. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. So yeah, Maokai, I think that he's going to be really sweet on this patch. Yumi's the next one that I'm going to put on here, and I know that Jolty's going to be rolling over in his grave, but, the fact of the matter is she's just really strong right now. She's banned a ton. Her win rate's not the highest, but I am coming in with this from a perspective of like playing jungle for the last month or so, so that's why some of this is shuffled around. I've kind of hopped off my ivory tower, a little bit. I guess it's not quite the full ivory tower, but like my diamond support play, and then, I've been kind of slumming it to some extent down in gold, trying to learn jungle. So I'm getting a different kind of perspective on this stuff, both from playing jungle, but also from playing with a bunch of gold players a lot, which I think is a bit closer to what, most people who are probably viewing this video are probably like silver, gold, low plat. So I think it's a bit closer to that kind of range. And Yumi is very, very strong. I think she's strong at higher elos as well. But Nami got nerfed out, so that's one of the major harassment champs that could threaten her in the laning phase. And of course, Nautilus and Leona have been nerfed. They are still like pretty good in some circumstances, but this champion is just a beast. Like, she's extremely difficult to deal with later on in the game. And I mean, one of the biggest things is she's an enchanter who scales like an enchanter, but can't really be killed a lot of times. She's just invulnerable, especially if she attaches to these late game kind of brawler, tanky type of champs, and they are coming back. You're seeing like Nunu's very strong. I'll be talking about him in the jungle support tier list, but like Nunu, Warwick, you're still seeing like Darius, Garen, Set. Next patch, you got Volibear coming in. So there's just a lot of these kind of beefcake champs that are running around, and if she attaches to one of those late game, it's going to be very difficult to win most of the time. So what is it? So number one, she's invulnerable for an enchanter. That's typically a major weakness of pretty much every other enchanter except for Rakan and Janna, is that, you know, if it's Sona, if it's Lulu, you know, if it's Nami and stuff like that, they can be picked off by things, and it's, you know, they're very gankable as well. She is pretty difficult to gank because she's got that, she can attach to her ADC. She's got that speed up to help them run out of there, and then she's got her Q to slow people down. She just brings a lot of tools, and then she has very good scaling as well, right? She now they changed it, I guess probably in the preseason. I don't remember exactly when they changed it, but now this adaptive force scales off of your ally's adaptive force. Yuumi and her anchor gain a flat adaptive force plus a percentage of the anchor's adaptive force. Okay, so this is something that even a I don't remember if it was who mentioned this in the chat, but it is Yuumi gets it off of her anchor stuff. Someone was saying, oh, that would be OP if it was Veigar with a death cap, and Yuumi gained that. Well, yeah, it is, and she does, right? They changed it. It used to be Yuumi gains a certain percentage of her ally stuff back in the day, and then the ally gained a certain percentage of Yuumi stuff. But now they've changed it to where it's all based on the anchor, okay? The anchor stuff. All right? So if it is a Veigar, if the Veigar does have 1,000 AP, Yumi's going to be getting, you know, at a minimum 12% of that 1,000 AP. And yes, it is extremely good. So that's how it works. So they made it, and it's obviously going to be better if it's based off of the person you're anchoring to, because most other champs are going to have a lot more gold than you are, and they're going to buy a lot more stats than you are. So she did lose some AP scaling on her abilities. So she personally buying things like, you know, Death Cap or Ludens is not as good as it used to be on her, but she does get the anchors bonuses now. So it does kind of even out. They did give 8% of the target's current health, which is kind of goofy. But it gives her some poke against full health targets in lane off of her Q. But that's the biggest thing, you know, one of the big things is she has this scaling here that scales off of the anchor, and it's 12% flat, right? Or 20%, I guess, of bonus AD. 20 bonus AD or 12 adaptive force. Wait, that's... That seems weird. Okay, so that's not exactly a... Because usually AP is at a higher rate than AD, because AD is a more valuable stat. Like, bonus AD is 35 gold apiece, bonus AP is 22 gold apiece, as far as itemization goes. So that's really funky. Okay, well, that makes her even better on flat AD champs. I guess because this is bonus AD and not total AD, so just like raw attack damage, maybe that's it. Raw attack damage as a stat is 35, but maybe stuff that only triggers off of bonus AD is worth less because it doesn't include base. I don't know. Either way, she gets a lot of extra stats. So does the ally. Basically for free. You just get... I think you have 1 point in this to start with. You just don't even put any other points in it. And then her E, this is the thing that... Another major thing they changed about her is they changed the cooldown to 8 seconds when you max this out. And I believe you probably go just like 3 points in Q and then max E. Yes, it does cost a ton of mana. But if you take Presence of Mind and Mana Flow Band, you can get enough mana to deal with this. And especially Presence of Mind is so clutch because it refunds a ton of your mana. And don't forget, you do get a mana refund when you detach and auto-attack somebody. You get quite a bit of extra mana. So if you're doing that regularly, it can be annoying, but it is manageable. But it does give off the 45% attack speed. This is great on things like Vayne, who's coming up right now. She's getting pretty strong. And then really just almost any AD carry is going to like this, except for like Jhin. Jhin does get some value out of it, but he does like the movement speed a lot. So it's just pretty good on almost everybody. You get attack speed. You get 3 seconds non-decaying movement speed of like usually at least 25%. So that's pretty insane. Because most movement speeds decay, but this doesn't. So you just make people go really fast. And then it's a pretty good heal, 210 plus 40% AP. Now, it's not the greatest heal in the game, especially on the AP side with that scaling, but still, it's good. And especially when you put an Athene's on her, which is almost always the first item that you rush, it ends up being a pretty big heal. And then final chapter. This ability is so strong because you have 3.5 seconds to reposition. So it's not like Sona where, Sona, like you can just flash Sona's ult, or sometimes Sona can miss. Like, it's so hard to miss this because even if you don't hit them like with the initial part, you can reposition and hit them later after that. And it just makes it so difficult to dive onto her. And if she's on an attach, like if she attaches onto someone who can engage, like a Darius or a Zac or something like that, it's just so hard to avoid this for 3.5 seconds. So it's just a very, very good team fighting tool, like really good utility with the zoomies, like decent heal, gives attack speed, gives movement speed. All three of those on one ability is just nuts on an 8-second cooldown. So when you get to 40% CDR, it's going to be on like a 5-second cooldown. The scaling off of you and me, the fact that she's invulnerable late game, just really, really difficult to deal with. I mean, her win rate's not the highest up there. It's only about 50%, but her ban rate's 42. Now, that doesn't always mean that a champion's OP. Sometimes it's just really annoying to play against, like in the case of Morgana, and like Yasuo and things like that. But I think it's warranted. I think she's annoying to play against because she's like really, really good. If you don't shut her down early, like she is vulnerable in the laning phase, but if you don't shut her down, it's very difficult to deal with her later. So I think that she's really strong right now. So lane pressure, I'm going to drop her down. I don't think I've updated these in a little bit. Maybe down to like a 3. Shouldn't apply that much pressure. Safety's very high up there. Reliability, I'll make a 4. And then scaling, I'm going to go ahead and make a 5. I think she's one of the highest scaling. So once again, her heal is not necessarily the strongest, in raw scaling compared to something like a Soraka. But the fact that it gives the speed and the attack speed, and her anchor, like her W, gives out bonus AP or AD, I think it's just so much. That's like 4 different ways of scaling. So yeah, very good. And then I think the standard is still just Airy, Mana Flow, Transcendence, Gathering Storm, and then just Presence of Mind and Cut Down. You could make an argument for Scorch if you have a very aggressive early lane because she doesn't scale as well with AP as she used to. But the AP ratios are still there. I still think playing for later, playing for Gathering Storm is probably the way to go. So yeah, that's what I would do. Now, you can do no boots. I think if you're in Platinum and lower, I would recommend Ionian boots if you're playing her. Just because you're going to be desynced from your AD carry. Either they die and you get away, or you take a back timing when they don't, or you're trying to like get wards by yourself or something like that. I would just have Ionian boots. They are really good. Usually you do take 2 offensive summoners, usually Ignite heal or Exhaust heal if you're jolty like Flash, but yeah, I would do it. But in like Challenger and Pro Play, you don't get the boots because they're not a necessity, because you do have the movement speed of whoever you're attached to, obviously. But you have to be synced up, right? You have to be near people. They have to be helping you ward. They have to be roaming with you. They have to have the same back timings as you, which means they're not dying, and they know how to actually manage the wave, and they don't overstay. There's just a lot of ifs, right? And Challengers are going to know that stuff. Diamond players, most of them are probably going to know that stuff. But like in Gold and lower, and probably through some of Platinum, that's not going to happen. So I would just probably go with Ionians. And then Frostfang, I could see an argument for Relic Shield too. Her AP ratios aren't that stellar once again, so is it worth risking like getting later wards in order to get a bit more AP? It's possible, but Relic is just going to be guaranteed money. You do have to hop off to land an auto attack for the. Well, no, I guess you don't. You could just use your Q to trigger it, I guess. But maybe I'm just going to say Relic. I think it's safer, and I would just rather have the health, honestly, late game, just in case you get caught out. Maybe that buys you enough time. And then it's usually just Athene's, and then Ardent Sensor if it's an AD carry who uses that stat really well, or just Redemption. So super strong champ right now. I think she's the best of the enchanters, especially after the Nami nerfs. Very, very spooky champ. I do not want to see that champ on the enemy team if I'm the jungler, for sure. Like, it just feels like you're on the clock, and it's actually pretty hard to gank her, especially if she's with like an Ezreal or just anything else with a dash, because She's just got that slow, and when she's got her ult, it's so hard to get a hold of her. But anyways, Yuumi gonna be very strong. Nautilus, I think, is still up there, and, you know, his win rate is not as stellar. Once again, kind of like Yuumi, it's about 50%, but he just feels very, very reliable, and you'll notice that with a lot of these champs, they are very reliable. There's a high probability they're going to do what they want to do, right? And Nautilus is very similar. He's got a huge hitbox on his Q, so it's pretty easy to hit. You can't go over walls with it, which is kind of annoying, but you can get away from stuff by hooking on to like towers or walls to help you get away. So that is really handy. He has that point click ultimate. It's very similar to Maokai, but longer range. Can knock up multiple people. Does pretty good AoE damage in team fights, just spamming E. Puts out quite a bit of damage. And, you know, his auto attacks added additional root in there. His defensive steroid is kind of weak. His W is not that great. But still, you slap a Gargoyle Stoneplate on this guy, and he's going to be a massive disruptive force in team fights, and he has a really good engage, too. 2 different forms with his hook, with his ult. Very high probability that they're going to land. So that's why I think that he's really strong right now. Now, you could do Aftershock, Font of Life, Bone Plating, Unflinching. I like Ghost Poro and Ulti Hunter. Getting more ultimates down is good. Ghost Poro gives you a little bit more vision in the early game. He actually does scale fairly well with AP. You don't get AP on him all the time, but when you complete that Ghost Poro between 15 to 20 minutes, it does give you a little bit of boost in your power. So that is really handy. Now, I would probably max the E. I think a lot of the problem with Nautilus is a lot of people are still maxing Q, even though it got nerfed. I think that's a mistake. The Q is good, but the E is where the real power is. It looks like people are finally switching back to that. I know for a few patches I was pounding the table, max E, as people weren't doing it. But the E is just really good because that's your wave clear. It adds a ton of extra damage in team fights. It lowers the cooldown on it. It's just very, very strong. Now, you can run into mana problems if you start doing that, especially if you open up with either a Knight's Vow or a Gargoyle. Those don't have any mana on it. So if you want to go that route, then maybe you just go, you know, in fact, I'll leave this, but if you're not getting a mana item early, if you're not getting either Zeke's or maybe Frozen Heart, I would only do Frozen Heart if they're like literally all AD. But if you're not getting that early, then you could go for not Mana Flow Band, Presence of Mind. Could go for Presence of Mind and the Tenacity rune. I think are Legend Tenacity are both very legit as well. I think I might just go over to that because you really can in longer fights start running into mana problems. And this will give you the freedom to get a Knight's Vow or a Gargoyle Stoneplate early on. Then you don't have to pay for mana. Because Presence of Mind, when it's fully stacked, just even the 500 mana itself is like 700 gold value. That's not including the refunded mana that you get. So it's huge. So not having to pay for mana on something like Zeke's, if you feel like you want to be tankier, personally tankier with something like a Knight's Vow or a Gargoyle Stoneplate can be really good. So do Presence of Mind and then Legend Tenacity. So yeah, just very reliable, very trusty, puts out respectable damage, still going to be a force. And then just Zeke's Gargoyle and then Locket, or you could go Ardent Sensor as well. Now, Ardent's kind of like the TSP special. It does work if you take Font of Life later on. You do have a shield with your W. It's not great, but it's okay, so you get some value out of the plus healing and shielding. But the fact that you have an AoE slow is going to put that that Font of Life trigger on everybody in fights, and then anyone that attacks that person that has the font on them is going to get the benefit from the Ardent Sensor. So that can give your entire team an extra boost to on-hit damage and attack speed. So especially if you have multiple champions that want that type of thing, you've got a Master Yi jungle and a Vayne AD carry, or you've got a top lane Vayne and a Kai'Sa bot lane. You know, there's anything that's going to like that attack speed. You got a Kindred jungle. It can be pretty good. So don't rush it, but if the game goes longer and it's like 4th or 5th item and you're already really tanky, I mean, once you have Gargoyle, you know, you're practically unkillable anyway, so just getting even more like tank items can kind of be overkill. But there you see like Redemption popping up a lot here, and that can be good. It's a similar concept, right? You're getting the healing and shielding power, which is only marginally useful on you. You're getting a bunch of mana regen, which with Presence of Mind, you don't need that as much. You're getting a little bit of health. But I just think that Ardent, is a similar type of thing to Redemption. It's just more offensive. Instead of giving your team a little bit of healing, you're giving your team a bunch more offense. So it's kind of up to you, but I think that that is an option that a lot of people really don't consider that much when playing Nautilus because they don't think about the font interaction. So once again, don't get it every game, but situationally, especially if your AD carry is really fed, it is worth considering. Okay. Janna's another one, and I've been a big Janna player in the past, but I've just been kind of like, I don't know about Janna, over the last year or so after the nerfs. But I think a lot of the other enchanters have been nerfed enough to where she is actually going to be quite strong right now. And the biggest thing is there's just a lot more champs that are worth peeling. They are going to be buffing AD carries a little bit next patch. But there's a lot of divers, especially in the jungle right now, and you're seeing them top lane as well. You're seeing the Warwicks, the Nunus, Set, Darius, Garen, the whole crew there. You're seeing a lot of these like melee, just bruiser or tank top laner type of champs. And she's just really good into that. Like, she's good at extending fights, making them go a little bit longer, peeling off some of those champs so they can't really do what they want to do. And she scales really well. This shield ends up giving 40 bonus AD, and then it gets 10% extra. So usually it's going to be in the mid to late game between 50 to 60 bonus AD. That's huge. It's going to be about 2,000 gold worth of stats. And then when you're giving bonus AD on someone who has crit, whenever they crit, that bonus AD also crit. So it's not just that you're giving them 50 AD, right? If they have Infinity Edge and, 50% to crit off of that, then that's going to be giving you effectively a little bit more than 50% extra damage. So you're going to be doing like somewhere between 75 to 90 extra damage on average per auto attack. That's a massive, massive contribution to damage. So that's pretty huge. The Tornado, she just has multiple forms of peel with Tornado and her ult. This ult reset, if they have like 3 or more melee on their team, which is pretty common these days, is just absolutely backbreaking. It just, they're going to lose all of their gap closers because they're going to have used all of their gap closers in the fight, and then you heal everyone else up to full. It's just massive. It doesn't seem like it's a big deal. Kind of stumbling over my words here. A little bit too much coffee probably. But it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But it really, really is. If you've played against a Janna, it's just a lot of her power. If you haven't played as Janna, it's difficult to understand. She's one of the most sort of secret power champs in the game because a lot of what she does is very low key. It doesn't show up on stat sheets. It doesn't say that she heals for 1 billion like Soraka at the end of the game. She's not going to get a massive CC score. She's not going to certainly not going to do a ton of damage, especially outside of the laning phase. So just she never shows up on a stat sheet other than the fact that she's going to have like a 5 KDA and she's going to have a high win rate. Like, that's the only thing that you're going to see from Janna on stat sheets. So a lot of people, therefore, just have a hard time understanding what she does. And they just think that she just gets carried and she's just kind of this e-girl champ. But there's actually a pretty decent amount of play to her. I would say that she's harder to play than something like Sona. Not as hard to play as like Bard or Thresh, but still, there's some stuff because a lot of your abilities are reactive. You have to anticipate what the enemy is going to do, and you have to try to, work to get the best outcome for your team. So you have to time this Howling Gale to knock Lee Sin out of the air, to knock Zac out of the air, to disrupt whatever they're trying to do. The same thing with Monsoon. You want to time that right. You don't want to save enemies with this. You want to save your allies, but you want to hold on to it long enough to bait the enemies to commit so that you can get that heal and then turn around the fight. So unlike someone who's proactive like a Leona or a Nautilus, where you're making the call, you're making the decision when to start the fight and how you want to manage it, with Janna, you have to consider what does the enemy want to do, and then how are you going to disrupt that? And so the fact that it's reactive requires faster reflexes and more planning ahead, I think, than proactive champions. I think in general, for an average player, proactive champions are going to be a better move. But I think if you get used to playing something reactive like Janna, then it can be strong. The problem is you don't have any engage. So if your team doesn't have any engage and they outscale you, that can be a problem. So if you have like an Ezreal on your team and it's like Ezreal Janna and the enemy team has like Yumi Vayne or something like that, that's going to be a massive, massive problem. So she is very strong, but you have to have allies that are worthy of peeling, right? So they have to be decent on their champs. So you want to be doing your research. You don't want to be like pairing her with like a first time ADC. So they have to, usually the ADC has to be pretty decent, or at least you have to have someone that's ranged that is really powerful that you can peel. So usually it's ADC, but it could also be something like a Kindred, could be something like a Cassiopeia, um, could be some type of other mage. So she's good. She's a little more situational, but I think she's extremely strong in the situations where she is strong, and she does have the highest win rate right now of all supports. So um, I think she's definitely worth considering. And I mean, she's not a pushover in the laning phase, right? Like she can actually, especially if you take like Comet and Cheap Shot and stuff like that. Like you have aggressive options you can do with her to be a real pest, especially against melees. Like if you're against Nautilus or Leona in the laning phase, you can be a terror. Now against Sona or like Nami, you got to be a little bit more conservative, but she can put down some damage in the laning phase. So I think that Ares is a nice balanced rune. It gives you extra damage in the laning phase, but also scales really well for late. Then Manaflow Transcendent Scorch, if you think you're going to be able to lay down a bunch of harass. If you have a lane that's going to lose really badly, then maybe you want to take Gathering Storm. So if it is the Ezreal, Janna versus Draven, Zyra, or something like that, maybe you go for Gathering Storm instead. And then secondaries, I'd probably, I do like the Ghost Poro Ulti Hunter combination is very good. A lot of people will do the Movement Speed Hunter as well. I forgot what that one's called, but some people do that because she does get extra scaling on her W and her passive from movement speed. So Relentless Hunter, that's what it is. So that can be pretty good too. Her ult's just on a very low cooldown, and it is pretty high impact in team fights. So it's up to you, but one of the hunters is probably a good idea. I like Ghost Poro. She scales really well with AP, gives you an extension on your wards early so you can watch Dragon from those level 4 5-minute Dragon takers, which is almost every jungler now. And yeah, I think those are pretty much your options. Like I said, Cheap Shot is also an option if you think that you're going to be able to harass really heavily because you just land a W on him and then auto attack and it's going to do the Cheap Shot damage. So especially against some of those lower range AD carries, that can be very good, like your Kaisas, your Vaynes, Sivers, things like that. A little bit harder to trigger that on stuff like Senna or Caitlyn, but nevertheless can be pretty good. Then typically Moby Boots, if you think you're going to have to run out of combat, if they have a bunch of really sticky champs that might be able to touch you, maybe you can go for Swiftness. I think Mobies are probably still the standard though. And then just Athene's Unholy Grail, Ardent Censer, and Redemption. Okay. Rakan is down here. I still think he's worthy, but he does have a hard time against some of these really sticky CC champs that are out there. Like Maokai is an absolutely atrocious matchup that feels terrible to play the Maokai. Stuff like Veigar is really bad. Nunu is not that fun to play against. So there's a lot of stuff out there that can be frustrating to play against, but I still think that he is going to be very good. I mean, the name of the game with Rakan is just versatility. Like, he's so versatile in his itemization because he can go tankier, but he can also go utility. So you can kind of adapt to the game. If you need to roam more, you can get a Shirelius fairly early on. If your AD carry's doing well, you can do Zeke's. If they're doing really well, you can do Zeke's into Ardent Censer. He can get both of those for, like, the ultimate on-hit damage. He's one of the only champs in the game that can comfortably get that without feeling kind of weird about it. You can go Redemption if your team's going to team fight a lot. So he has a lot of different options and different items he can get. I wouldn't recommend going Knight's Vow anymore. He does only get half value on it, and I think there are just probably better options these days. But very flexible there. He can engage, he can peel, he can roam. There's just so many different things you can do with Rakan, and so I think that's part of what makes him really strong. Very good scaling on his shields, a 1.6 AP ratio is going to be really good. So I would just go Guardian, Font of Life, Conditioning, Unflinching, and then just Ghost Poro, Ulti Hunter. I do really like Ulti Hunter on him because he has a very, very high impact ult. Should be a kill pretty much every time you have it. Because not only is it like an engage, but you can run at them. So, it's a very, very high probability you're going to land it unless they flash. And even if they do, you might still be able to hit it. And you can hit multiple targets with it. So, I think that Rakan is still going to be super good. He is a bit harder to play, though. Your average Rakan player, not going to be that great while they're learning him. So, that's why I have him down just a little bit. But his potential is really high. Um, so yeah, just watch out if they have a bunch of very heavy CC and burst champs. Now he's one of my favorite ones into assassins though, because you can itemize into tank stuff if you need to, right? Like even just something like a Zeke's, and the fact that you have Guardian plus your own double personal shield that scales really heavily off the 1.6 AP ratio. Its base shielding is really high too. I think I don't remember the exact numbers on it, but I think it's something like well, I guess I can just pull it up here. I think it's something like each shield is like 140, right? And then it goes to 280. Yeah. 140 shield. Um so it goes to a 280 with a 1.6 ratio. And if they do have a scary assassin, you can just go with 3 points of grand entrance in lane and then max shield if you want to. He's pretty versatile. Some people max shield, some people max W. I wouldn't recommend maxing Q these days. But I mean, that's very, very good assassin control, right? The fact that you can put out like a 400 shield or something with a very minimal amount of AP, and you can also take Guardian to go along with that. Means it's gonna, and you have your like super high probability charm, right? So you just R and then shield over on them. If the Zed jumps on your AD carry, they're going to get charmed. Zed's not going to get to finish up, and there's going to be a massive shield. So he just really stuffs a lot of assassin diver type of champs. Very, very good. Unless they're like supremely fed, they've got like 10 kills or something, it's going to be really hard for them to pick off anyone on your team. So that's why I really like him into things like Zed, Talon, Rengar, Kha'Zix, all that stuff. He's going to be really solid. Okay. So yeah, Rakan going to be really strong. Talked about him a ton for the last year. So we'll pull that off. Now, Pyke, I did raise up quite a bit. He was an honorable mention, but I'm bringing him back up here near the top because I do think that he does function a lot better at gold and lower if you get your money. There are several things about Pyke, and part of it is he encourages a playstyle that is good for climbing. So part of it's just his playstyle, in that he does rotate, he does roam, and he does want to show up to fights. I think that it can be a problem in gold over rotating, but it's weird because people under rotate and they over rotate. A lot of the time, people just can't calibrate when they should roam correctly. I do have a roaming guide if you want to help calibrate your roaming that I did release a couple of weeks ago that should be on the main page, the Strategy Professor on YouTube. But he encourages people to roam and come help clean up kills, which I think is really nice. He gets a huge benefit out of that, so he does get a lot of extra gold. He is one of the best roamers, if not the best roamer out there, especially after the nerfs to Nautilus and Leona earlier in the season. He's very fast with his W. He's invisible, which is really good. And he has, an additional gap closer and a hook. So he's just kind of built to be the best offensive hook champion out there because short cooldown hook, goes over walls, pulls people pretty much all the way back to you, and then you have a follow-up stun, and you have an execute on top of that. So very good roaming. He can also take Umbral early, which is really nice. So you get really strong vision control early on. You have a sweeper, you have Umbral, you have your hook, you have the executes. So he can feel pretty bad if you fall far behind, but if you're roaming properly, if you're looking for opportunities, there's so many just random fights that go on in solo queue that you can find opportunities to go clean people up. So not going to be as strong against a bunch of like heavy tank champs, so be careful with that. But if they do have some squishy champs out there, he is very, very good. So I do think that Pyke's going to be a bit solid. Now I'm going to speed up a bit, so I'm not going to click on all of these Google Docs for 5 through 15 here, but you're welcome to come through and click on them on your own if you want to see the recommended runes, recommended items. Pyke is a little bit different. There are several things that can work. You can still do the classic electrocute if you want to. Some people still take aftershock. It does give you a bit more tankiness, especially if you're against those tank matchups and you're afraid you might get blown up. Some people go Hail of Blades. That's kind of the most early game, like all-in kind of rune. It does give you 3 really fast auto attacks, which is going to be more than I was going to call it Thunderlords, but the lightning thing. It's going to be more than that early on. The lightning is going to scale harder late game, but it's not as good early game. So lots of different options there. Be sure to think about it. And then I would just go Umbral, probably Ghostblade, just to help you out with your roams, and then Dustblade. But the order in which you get those can vary a little bit. But I would go Umbral early most of the time just to get that super vision control. Because remember, and I can tell you this after jungling, for the last month or so, quite a bit, clearing the vision for your jungler is a very, very big deal. It's not just like it's a big deal, right? So having Umbral and clearing out that river allows the jungler to gank for you. It does not work to spam ping help, and ask your jungler to come down if you're not clearing the wards for them. Yes, they can come down and clear the wards, but it's going to be wasting their time. You have more time to do that as support. You don't have to CS. You don't have to clear jungle camps, right? There's not other lanes you could be roaming to. Right, so set up your jungler for success. Get the Umbral, get your sweeper, clear out all the wards, and then you can ask for a gank if you position the wave in a way that makes sense. But it's just so many times people will just ping me, and I'll show up, and the enemy runs away, and I know it's warded, and then I sweep, and it's warded. So they're calling me down there for a gank without clearing the wards first, and it ends up wasting 20 seconds of your time. And then what happens? A lot of times it's well, the enemy team's oh, there's the jungler. He's on the bot side now trying to gank. Okay, well, I guess we'll go ahead and kill top side and get Rift Herald. Right? So whenever they see you on wards, if you're a jungler, it's very, very bad because it not only stops the gank, but they know where you are. And if they have a brain, they can do something on the other side of the map to punish you for it. They can take your camps, grab a gank, grab an objective. It's bad, okay? So vision, vision, vision. Always shut out every ward you can find. Don't ever let them peep on your jungler. Especially if you know they're roaming in your, you see them and you know they're roaming up there and they're warding deep in the jungle. They're getting eyes on blue or Gromp or something like that. Do not let that stand. You have to go up there and counter vision that, okay? You have to shut that up. That's just PSA for all the junglers out there, all right? So Pyke is very good at that because he uses Umbral, I think, better than almost anyone. Senna uses it pretty well. But Pyke, just because he can so quickly get over there and clear it because he's so fast, right? With his W, with his dash, you can roll over there no problem. Even if you don't have lane priority, you can still zip over there, clear a ward, and then zip back probably and get away without any real danger. So he is one of the supreme vision masters right up there with Maokai. He doesn't supply extra vision, but he shuts it out. So I think that that's very useful. So make sure you're taking advantage of that because that's a big strength of Pyke. That people just don't leverage enough, I think. Okay, Lulu's another one that has been creeping up a little bit. She's been sitting around 52, 53%. Lulu is very good with champions that have strong auto attacks. So things that want to stack up passives, or not necessarily passives, but stack up a lot of attack speed and have special interactions with that. So examples would be Kai'Sa with her passive, Vayne with her on hit, Kog'Maw with his W, on hit. Sometimes Varus if he's going for the on hit build. A lot of Varus are going for the lethality sort of sniper build. But just anything that's going to really want a lot of attack speed, Lulu's going to be good. Now, a problem though with Lulu is that Yuumi kind of does a similar thing now, right? That used to be unique to Lulu, that she would buff up attack speed as a support. But Yuumi has the exact same attack speed buff. And that's why Lulu is not tier 1 on my list, although I think she is pretty good right now. I just think that Yuumi is probably a better version of Lulu. So I think it's the exact same. Yuumi gives 45%, and I think Lulu also gives 45%. Yeah. So Yuumi, the rework of Yuumi is sort of stealing some of Lulu's thunder. Now, Yuumi does have, or Lulu does have other things that are unique, but that is one sort of knock to her, and that she's way, Yuumi is way, way safer than Lulu is. But Lulu also does, and they both give movement speed whenever you do this. So, that's the thing, is it gives 30% movement speed for a few seconds, and gives 45% attack speed when you buff up an ally. Almost literally the exact same thing as Yuumi does. And that's the mode you're going to be using a lot late game. Now, she does have a different mode where you can polymorph an enemy, which is basically, it's like stunning them, but they can still, hop around at a smaller movement speed for 2.25 seconds. Now, that sounds really good, but the problem, that's always been the problem with Lulu, is that you have to choose one of these. You don't get both. So it's kind of cool that you have a decision, but that lowers her power level tremendously because your best ability, you can only use half of it at any given time. So most of the time, late game, you're going to want to be attached to people, and you're going to want to use the buff if your AD carry is, has a brain. Then you're going to want to be doing this a lot of the time. Now, she does have a shield, and you might say, well, this shield is stronger than Lulu's heal. If we look at this, right, it's a 240 shield, and it's got a 60% AP ratio. True, but she can also be killed, right, where Yumi can't be killed. So, I don't know. It's a trade-off. Now, you do get the extra damage off of the on-hit here, and it does add up to be quite a lot. You know, at level 11, it's 75 on-hit damage. It does scale with 15% AP, so that's going to be a lot closer to, like, 90 damage on hit. That's why I'm saying attack speed users are really good. Now, this can't trigger twice off of Gensu's, and it doesn't trigger off of Hurricane on multiple targets because it's on attack, not on hit. But nevertheless, it's still really, really good on champs that have a lot of attack speed. So she has some of the best buffing to offense. I think her buff to offense is probably overall better than Janna's. It's on par with Yumi's. Yumi does get the you and me, which depends on the situation. I think picks on someone who attacks a lot is going to end up being more damage than you and me. But you and me is going to be a lot more damage on like burst champions, assassins, and things like that, and definitely AP users. So Lulu is just ultra. You're all in on attack speed and buffing up a ranged champion that really abuses attack speed pretty much. Now her wild growth is good. It is on a fairly low cooldown. It does circumvent grievous wounds effects, which are out there and very popular right now, because there's a lot of healing going on. So it does get around Ignite, it does get around Executioners and Thorn Mails and stuff like that to add bonus health. But it's a pretty low amount considering it's single target. I mean, it's only 450, and it only has a 50% AP ratio compared with something like Janna, which heals for like baseline like 600 on multiple targets at level 11 and has like 150% scaling. It's just going to be way stronger. It does have a knock-up, which is nice for champions like Yasuo. So it's got some unique stuff to it, but the big kicker is its single target and its base number is pretty low. It also does not benefit from plus healing and shielding. So yes, it gets around grievous wounds, but it also doesn't benefit from your Athene's Unholy Grail. It doesn't benefit from your Ardent Censer and things like that. So she is good, but that is something that kind of does hold her back in that she's modular. She has options, right? You can polymorph, you can give attack speed, you can do damage in the laning phase, you can give a shield, but you can only do one at once, and that's sort of what holds her back. And her Q is just atrocious. I mean, like, it has good base damage later on, but you just can't level this up. It has no AP scaling. It just kind of got nerfed into the dirt because of solo lane Lulu sort of taken over maybe 3 or 4 seasons ago. But anyways, Lulu still going to be pretty strong. And then we've got Nami. Nami's still really good. We've only got a few minutes left, so I'll just flip through these last ones kind of quicker. Still good. Ended up getting that nerf on her movement speed on her passive last patch, or patch before last, 10.9. Or 10.8. Whatever, recently. And that does add up. I did try to play Nami. It feels pretty bad. And her win rate reflects that. She lost about a 2% win rate off of that. So it's a bit more meaningful than I thought it was going to be, but she still does have good trading in the laning phase. She just doesn't provide as much mobility, which is kind of a hit when a bunch of champs kind of rely on mobility, right? The Darius, the Sets, all that crew. So it's definitely a hit to that, but she still does trade well. If you land your bubbles, it's good. Tidal Wave's still a pretty good disengage. So she's up there. She's just not as strong as she used to be. If you want to build her, standard Athene's, Ardent Censer, Redemption type of build, she still can be pretty solid. Okay, Blitzcrank's another one who's really good, especially against enchanters out there. It's very obvious what Blitzcrank does. Everyone understands it. You land your hook, you're a god. You don't land your hook, you're completely worthless. So if you find yourself landing between, like maybe 50% and 75% of your hooks, you're landing a lot of them, then he can be pretty good. Now, it is harder against highly mobile champs, so against something like Ezreal, Lucian, Vayne, stuff like that, he's going to be a lot worse because it's harder to hit those champs. But if you're against stuff that doesn't have a dash, you're against like a Jinx, Misfortune, things like that, then you can definitely go to town with Blitzcrank and take over games. Now, a standard build on Blitzcrank's just going to be your run-of-the-mill tank items, like Zeke's, Knight's Vow, stuff like that. I do think that there is an option to go for something that's AP-oriented. Something like a GLP would not be terrible on Blitz. It is kind of expensive, but it would add an extra slow. If it's like kind of lower mid-range champs, that have a dash, like a Lucian or like a Vayne. You can use the GLP to slow them and then hit the hook on them after they dash. That would also allow you to run up to him. It would also give you more utility in team fights. He does have really good AP scaling. His hook is 100% AP, so is his ult. Now his movement speed and his power fist or whatever don't have any ratios on him, I don't think. But it's worth considering. I've never tried it out. It could be okay. It might be bad. Something like Proto Belt even. People don't do Proto Belt on him, but it's like, why not? Like, you hook him in, you silence him. Why not just hit him in the face with an extra like 300 damage off of Proto Belt? Has CDR on it, has AP ratio on it. I mean, it gives you 120 just from the AP ratio alone. And then, like, hitting them in the face with all the bolts because they're going to be right in front of you. They can't dodge it because they're knocked up. I never see him going Proto Belt, but I've seen people doing that on stuff like Nunu, that can knock people and do a lot of damage to them from point blank range. Like, why not? It would also give you a bit more wave clear if you find yourself, alone in a lane needing to clear it really fast. Because your team didn't clear it before they rotated a dragon or something. Maybe you do it there. So I don't know. I think, and Proto Belt's pretty cheap too. It's only 2,500, and it just feels like Zeke's. It's like something like Zeke's. It's like, why? I mean, I guess it does give you more utility, but ideally you just hook and just one shot them, right? You're not looking for a long fight. You're gonna lose those. You just want the quick, like they're dead. So I don't know. So let me know what you think out there in the comments if you've ever tried Proto Belt or GLP. I think that he could go for some AP utility items potentially. But most people are still going to just build him tanky with Knight's Vow, stuff like that. And then Bard. I've dropped Bard down a little bit. His win rate's so high. I frankly just don't understand how this champ wins a lot. I don't know. Like, he's cool. Like, he has aggression in the laning phase, but he can rotate around. It's just like, if you're really, really good on Bard, I guess you can make it work. But for your average Bard player, I just think he's too conditional. Like, there's just so much counterplay from the enemy. They can, that, like, your ult takes a while, especially from long range. There's a huge telegraph on it. He's really short range in the laning phase. He can do a lot of damage. It's just, I don't know. He's just weird, man. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, I just feel like there's a lot of, like, if this, if that, maybe this. He just seems like he's just too risky to me. But if you love him, I know there are people on the channel that really love Bard. He obviously has a nice win rate right now. So you definitely can make him work, but be ready to lose a lot of games while you're learning him. And then the final sort of list here, Zyra, very good AP mage bottom. If you pair it together with something like a Misfortune, a Jhin, Draven, something that can do some damage early. Great at getting priority, has pretty solid vision control with the plants. Kind of difficult to gank for a lot of champions. If she puts up that slow plant, she can also turn it around and just blow up the gank if it's a squishier champion. So pretty dangerous champ, especially in gold and lower. I think that she can be very strong. Her items are expensive, but if you get ahead in lane, then you can make her work. And then Brand is kind of like Zyra as well. Brand's a lot better if they have like 3 or 4 melee champs, if they all just group up, if you're going to team fight a lot. He does have more uptime in lane, but his abilities are more conditional. You have to have a clean line of shot to land your stun with the Q, whereas Zyra can just do everything through the minion wave. So you're going to expose yourself to potential hooks and skill shots from the enemy if you have to walk around the wave. You can harass with your W without going for the Q with Brand, but he is going to be a little bit riskier, but he can still do a ton of damage. He can be good. Senna, going to be decent, has that long range, can get Umbral, which is a huge plus. We talked about that for the vision control. I think that's a big deal. Decent champ, but the problem is she can't get mana immune as a support as comfortably, and that's one of the major things that makes her really strong as an ADC, is that she can abuse mana immune early on and the on-hit effect with that. So can't really do that as comfortably as support, so that's kind of rough, but she can still work. Thresh, very good if you're a god on him, has good peel, has good engage, but very squishy early on, can potentially be very vulnerable to some of these all-in champs like a Maokai or like a Nautilus if they get a hold of you, because his base armor is so low if he doesn't have a lot of souls. So he's okay, but you have to be very, very good on him, and your team has to actually click on the lantern, follow up on your engages, all the usual, tank stuff, so that can be a little risky. but he's gonna be squishier a lot of the time, so you don't have as much time for them to follow up before you die. And then Leona, still good. I just like Nautilus more. She does more damage. If she gets in there, she has more guaranteed like CC time, but she doesn't have any escapes, and she has to go all the way in. Anyways, that's gonna be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day. If you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.